The cold metal handcuffs tightened painfully and humiliatingly around Evelyn Hayes's wrists. She stood straight, her back facing the tall, wide glass wall of Terminal 4 at John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York. The bright white lights reflected off the glass, but they could not illuminate the gloom that enveloped her. Her elegant, perfectly tailored suit, her discreet designer leather handbag lying at her feet, all her elegance and quiet power seemed meaningless under the rough hands of the two young policemen standing before her. Officer Ryan Vance, the older and clear leader, stood with his arms crossed, his thin lips curled into a sneer of mockery and contempt. His blonde hair was cropped short, and his cold blue eyes scanned Evelyn from head to toe, stopping deliberately on her expensive clothes and luggage. Beside him, Officer Ben Carter, younger, more inexperienced, tried to appear tough, but his eyes were filled with worry and insecurity, only knowing how to stand by and support his comrades. Let's see, Vance said, his tone patronizing and prejudiced, loud enough that a few passing passengers glanced back curiously before hurrying away. These designer clothes, that crocodile handbag? You must have made a lot of money, ma'am? He emphasized the word ma'am with undisguised sarcasm. I know your type. You look unusually successful. Are you smuggling something in here? Or is it contraband? He glanced at the handbag at Evelyn's feet, as if it contained incriminating evidence. Carter quickly echoed, though his voice was a little shaky. Right, Ryan. It looks suspicious. Why would someone like her have so many expensive things? Evelyn Hayes remained perfectly silent. She showed no fear or panic. Instead, her dark, piercing eyes calmly surveyed her surroundings with the intense focus of a seasoned investigator. She took in every detail: Vance's flushed face, the number 1138 on his name tag, Carter's fidgeting, number 1205, their precise locations in the vast terminal, the orientation of the security cameras mounted on the ceiling, the indifferent or curious reactions of the other passengers, then their hasty departures. A sad, complicit silence. The loudspeaker announcements of arrivals and departures echoed throughout the terminal, mingling with the clatter of suitcase wheels on the polished floors. The distinct smell of jet fuel wafted through the air. In the hustle and bustle of one of the world's largest international airports, the contrast between the elegant, strangely calm appearance of the handcuffed woman and the rude, aggressive, prejudiced attitudes of the two young police officers became even more stark and painful. Vance seemed uncomfortable with Evelyn's silence and calm. He stepped closer, lowering his voice in a falsely friendly manner, but his words were laced with naked threat. Listen, ma'am, he said, his cigarette-scented breath blowing into Evelyn's face. We can take you to the airport police station right now, search everything you're carrying, run a background check on you. You know, the paperwork here is complicated. You might have to stay here for a few days, miss out on all your business. He paused deliberately, staring into Evelyn's unwavering eyes. Or, Vance continued, his tone turning blatantly conditional, you could make things a lot easier. Make it more enjoyable for both parties. Evelyn remained silent, but her eyes grew cold. She knew exactly what was coming. Just a little goodwill from you, Vance continued, licking his dry lips, revealing his greedy nature. Do us a little compensation to get it over with. Consider it a no-disturbance fee. He glanced around as if afraid someone might hear, though his voice was still loud enough for Evelyn to hear. How about $1,000 in cash? Not much for someone as posh as you, is it? He gestured to the small wallet in Evelyn's bag. Just give us the money, and we'll pretend nothing happened. We'll forget all the suspicions. We'll release your handcuffs immediately, and you can go wherever you want. No one will know, no one will notice. Quick and easy, right? Vance's face was full of smugness. He was sure he had the upper hand, that this wealthy, lonely black woman would be frightened and obediently hand over the money to avoid trouble. Ben Carter stood beside him, his face still tense, but also expectant. $1,000 split between them was a pretty good sum for two low-ranking cops. Racist behavior, abuse of power, illegal handcuffing has now escalated to a much more serious crime: attempted extortion, demanding bribes right at the international airport. Two young policemen, blinded by greed and prejudice, had no idea that they had just dug a deep hole that would bury their own futures. Minutes earlier, Evelyn Hayes had cleared immigration and retrieved her small suitcase from the baggage carousel. She had just finished a long flight from Geneva, Switzerland, to attend a major international conference on cybersecurity and global counterterrorism. As the head of one of the world's leading intelligence and law enforcement agencies, her presence at the conference was highly confidential. On her return trip, she had decided to fly commercial as a regular passenger, accompanied only by a few aides and security agents who kept a discreet distance, as she had instructed. Evelyn wanted the opportunity to observe the security procedures and operations at a major gateway airport like JFK without the usual preparations for high-ranking officials to travel. She was dressed elegantly, in a suit by a famous designer but in a classic style, not too flashy. Her handbag and suitcase were also designer but discreet, without any obvious logos. She wanted to blend in with the crowd, not attract special attention. But perhaps it was the unusually successful appearance of a middle-aged black woman traveling alone that caught the eye of Officer Ryan Vance. As Evelyn was walking toward the taxi stand outside the terminal, she was stopped by Vance and Carter. "Excuse me, ma'am. We need to check your identification," Vance said, his tone initially professional. Evelyn paused calmly. "Is there a problem, officer?" "Random security check," Vance replied curtly, his eyes scanning her clothes and luggage with scrutiny. "Please show me your ID." Evelyn pulled her driver's license from her purse, a valid form of identification that did not reveal her true position. Vance took it, examined it unnecessarily, and began asking questions that went beyond the scope of a routine examination. "Where are you from? What is the purpose of your trip? Why are you traveling alone? What's in this luggage? What do you do that makes you seem so rich?" His tone became increasingly insolent and prejudiced. Evelyn patiently answered questions briefly and appropriately, but she began to feel increasingly uncomfortable with the clearly racist attitudes and questions. "Officer," she said, her voice still calm but now a little stern, "I don't understand why you're asking me these questions. I have presented my proper papers. If there is no other valid reason, please let me go." "A valid reason?" Vance sneered. "We suspect you may be transporting illegal goods. We need to search your luggage." "On what basis do you suspect?" Evelyn asked, looking him straight in the eye. "Do you have a search warrant, or at least a specific probable cause?" Evelyn's direct, legalistic questioning seemed to have angered Vance. He took it as resistance and a challenge to his authority. "That's enough," he snapped. "Your behavior is suspicious. Carter, handcuff her. We're taking her to the station for questioning." Ben Carter looked hesitant, but under Vance's glare, he had to take out the handcuffs. "You have no right to do that," Evelyn protested, her voice now sharp. "This is an abuse of power and false imprisonment." "Shut up," Vance shouted. "What do you think of rules and regulations? Where did you get the money to dress so fancy? It must be illegal." He turned to Carter. "Cuffs!" And so the cold handcuffs tightened around Evelyn Hayes's wrists. Throughout the process of being stopped, questioned rudely, searched without cause, and finally illegally handcuffed, Evelyn Hayes showed no sign of fear or weakness. Her brain, trained by decades of dealing with the most dangerous and complex situations, was working at full capacity. She was not just a victim, she was also a master investigator, quietly gathering evidence. When Vance made his blackmail offer of $1,000, Evelyn was not surprised. She had expected this from his attitude and previous insinuations. She kept silent, looking straight into Vance's eyes, not out of foolish defiance, but to give him more time to dig himself deeper into the hole. Her silence only made him more smug, more talkative, more evidence against himself. What? No money? Or don't want to cooperate? Vance lost patience with Evelyn's eerie silence. Fine then. Go to the station. You'll have to tell everything there. He turned to signal Carter to prepare to escort her away, probably to the airport police station or someplace more discreet to continue the pressure. That was the last straw. Evelyn Hayes knew it was time to act. She had irrefutable evidence of a series of crimes: racial profiling, abuse of power, false arrest and handcuffing, and culminating in a brazen extortion plot. It was time for these two young cops to face the real consequences of their actions. It was time for them to learn how fatally wrong they had been. Just as Ben Carter's hand touched Evelyn's arm to nudge her forward, she spoke. Her voice was surprisingly calm, but there was an undercurrent of authority that made both cops flinch. I need to make a phone call, Evelyn said clearly, word by word. Ryan Vance smirked, his smugness not completely gone. Call? Now? Who are you calling? Your lawyer? Or your boss to pay the ransom? He continued his taunts, not realizing the situation was about to completely turn around. Evelyn ignored his words. She repeated her request, her tone brooking no refusal. I need to call my deputy director. Vice President? Vance and Carter looked at each other, frowning in confusion. Vice President of what? Vance asked again, his voice still patronizing but now a little curious. What company do you work for that you have a vice president? He still thought she was some kind of businesswoman, probably doing illegal business. Give me my cell phone, please, Evelyn demanded firmly. It's in the zipper compartment of my bag. Carter hesitated, glancing at Vance for instructions. Vance, perhaps thinking that it wouldn't hurt to let her make the call, maybe even have her bring money, shrugged and signaled Carter to do so. Carter bent down, opened his designer leather bag, and pulled out a jet black smartphone. It didn't look like much on the surface, but it was actually a government-issued communications device with the highest level of encryption. Carter handed the phone to Evelyn. Even though her hands were still cuffed, she managed to deftly tap the screen. She must have used voice recognition or a special gesture code she had set. The screen lit up and a call was placed almost instantly to a top priority number. Ben Carter, following Evelyn's signal, held the phone to her ear. The other end of the line answered immediately, a deep, professional male voice. Marcus, it's me, Evelyn, Evelyn said into the phone, her voice now completely different, no longer that of a passenger but that of a supreme commander. I'm at JFK Airport, Terminal 4, near Exit 7. She paused for a second, glancing at the two officers who were listening in bewilderment. There has been a serious security incident involving two local police officers here. Names: Officer Ryan Vance, badge number 1138, and Officer Ben Carter, badge number 1205. They have placed me in handcuffs without my permission and have just committed an act of attempted extortion. Her voice became colder and more steely. I need the FBI New York Field Office Rapid Response Team at my location immediately. Notify Special Agent in Charge John Riley. Level 1 priority classification. Repeat, Level 1 priority. Vance and Carter heard every word. Marcus, Evelyn, New York FBI Office, Chief Agent John Riley, Level 1 priority. The names and terms were like alarm bells going off in their heads, especially the words FBI. Their faces began to change rapidly, from bewilderment to utter confusion. Who was this woman? Why was she calling the FBI? How did she know the name Chief Agent Riley? And what did Level 1 priority mean? A sense of unease, a vague fear began to creep into their minds. Evelyn ended the call with a short, "Understood, Marcus. Stand by for further instructions." She motioned for Carter to put the phone down. Then she turned back, looking straight into Ryan Vance's eyes, whose smug look had completely disappeared, replaced by growing confusion and fear. "You," Evelyn said, her voice cold as ice, each word like a knife cutting into the officer's mounting panic, "have just made a very, very serious mistake." She paused for a beat, letting the weight of the warning sink in. "You just illegally handcuffed, insulted, and attempted to blackmail the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation." The last two words, FBI director, rang out like a clap of thunder in the clear day. Vance and Carter stood frozen in place, completely frozen. Their mouths were open in shock and horror. Their eyes were wide, staring at Evelyn as if they couldn't believe what they were hearing. All the color drained from their faces in an instant, leaving only the sickening whiteness of utter fear. They looked at the woman before them, the expensive suit that couldn't hide her authority, the terrifying calmness of her demeanor from beginning to end, and now the unbelievable yet unquestionable statement. FBI director? This woman is the director of the FBI, Evelyn Hayes, the head of the most powerful federal law enforcement agency in the United States? No. Impossible. It must be a joke. A mistake. But the authoritative tone of her voice when she called, the names she mentioned, and especially her extraordinary calmness from the beginning until now, all showed that it couldn't be fake. Ryan Vance's whole body shook, his voice stuttering. No, you're joking. Right, ma'am? Please tell me you're joking." He almost wanted to rush forward and uncuff Evelyn, but his feet were frozen to the floor, unable to move from fear. Ben Carter stood there like a statue, his face pale, his whole body shaking. He stared at Evelyn, then at Vance, his mind filled with a vast void of horror. He realized he had just participated in something terrible. He had helped his teammates handcuff and try to blackmail the FBI director. The consequences of this action were unimaginable. The fatal mistake was exposed. The fate of the two young policemen was sealed the moment they decided to stop the elegant black woman. Less than 10 minutes after that fateful call, a surprisingly short time, given the efficiency and absolute priority of the summons, a small commotion began to form at the end of the hallway. A group of about 5 or 6 men and women, dressed in plain clothes but exuding professionalism, determination, and an invisible authority, moved quickly and in an organized manner toward Evelyn Hayes and the two petrified police officers. They moved as a single unit, their sharp gazes scanning the gathering crowd of onlookers who automatically parted to make way. Leading the group was a middle-aged man with graying hair and a tailored dark suit. He was Special Agent in Charge John Riley, the head of the FBI's New York office. Ryan Vance and Ben Carter had probably seen his picture or heard his name during interagency security briefings at the airport. The presence of such a high-ranking figure confirmed their worst fears. Riley walked straight to Evelyn Hayes, his face showing a mixture of concern and anger as he saw his superior still handcuffed. "Director Hayes!" he exclaimed, his voice filled with respect and concern. "Are you okay? What happened?" The other FBI agents quickly spread out, forming a discreet but effective perimeter around the area. Their cold, piercing gazes swept over Ryan Vance and Ben Carter, assessing the situation and ready to act on orders. The atmosphere around them became extremely tense. Real power was present. Evelyn Hayes, still handcuffed, had regained her commanding demeanor. She calmly replied to SAC Riley, "I'm fine, John. No injuries. But these two officers are in serious trouble." She nodded toward Vance and Carter, who were now pale and shaking like leaves, unable to look up at the FBI agents. Following the director's gaze, Riley turned to look at the two policemen with fiery eyes. He didn't need to ask any more questions. He ordered his agents firmly, his voice filled with authority. "Disarm these two officers immediately, their badges and radios. Hold them for processing." Two large, well-trained FBI agents immediately approached Vance and Carter. The two officers made no attempt to resist. They were too shocked, too frightened, and completely paralyzed by the overwhelming federal presence. The sidearms, extra handcuffs, radios, and police badges they wore so proudly were quickly and professionally taken away by the FBI agents. Another agent approached Evelyn Hayes. "Excuse me, Director," he said, and carefully used a special key to release the handcuffs that bound her hands. The soft click of the handcuffs was the end of Vance and Carter's brief freedom and the end of their careers. Once freed, Evelyn gently rubbed her slightly red wrist. Then she turned to Riley and began giving clear, coherent instructions, demonstrating the experience and absolute authority of the head of the FBI. "John, seal off this area immediately. No one except our staff and authorized personnel will be allowed in or out," she ordered. "Collect all data from the security cameras within range of the incident, from the time I was stopped until now. Have the technical department analyze it immediately. Seize the walkie-talkies and any personal recording devices these two officers may be carrying. Particularly check to see if they are using body cams. If so, that would be extremely important evidence. Identify and record any passengers or airport personnel who witnessed the incident. Your team will take their statements later. Immediately contact the office of the Deputy U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of New York. Notify them of the incident and request that a prosecutor be dispatched to the scene." Riley and the FBI agents obeyed and quickly deployed their assigned tasks. Sergeant Al Miller, the airport police supervisor for Vance and Carter's unit, had also been notified and rushed to the scene. His face paled at the sight of the chaos. The FBI director was standing by to direct the federal agents, while two of his subordinates were disarmed and restrained. Sergeant Miller stammered, trying to apologize to Evelyn Hayes and SAC Riley, but he was clearly in complete shock and at a loss for what to do. Meanwhile, Ryan Vance and Ben Carter, fully aware of the inevitable dire consequences that awaited them, job loss, criminal prosecution, jail time, began their desperate begging. "Director Hayes! Please, please forgive us!" Vance cried, tears and snot streaming down his face, completely losing his image as a police officer. "We were idiots! We were wrong! We didn't know! We really didn't know it was you! Please give us a chance to make things right! We're young and inexperienced, with a whole future ahead of us. Please don't ruin our lives!" Ben Carter also sobbed along. "Yes, Director! Please have mercy. We are just following a bad habit. We promise we will never do it again. Please ... Evelyn Hayes turned back to look at the two crying and pleading men. Her eyes were cold, without a trace of pity or hesitation. "You are not wrong for not recognizing who I am," she said, her voice calm but powerful, cutting through their pleas. "You are wrong for abusing your position and authority. You are wrong for acting on racial prejudice. You are wrong for illegally handcuffing an innocent citizen. And you are guilty of a serious crime by intentionally extorting money from the person you were supposed to protect." She paused, letting her words sink into Vance and Carter's panicked minds. "This belated repentance cannot erase those actions. Now remain silent, cooperate with my agents, and wait for the legal process to take its course." The FBI director's words were a premature verdict. Vance and Carter knew that any pleas would be futile. The tide had turned. The wheels of federal justice were in motion, and they were firmly on their tracks. Once the situation at the scene was fully under control by FBI agents, the case of officers Ryan Vance and Ben Carter was quickly transferred to full federal investigative and prosecutorial jurisdiction. This decision was made not only because the victim was the FBI director, but also because the nature of the crimes. Serious violations of civil rights under color of law and conspiracy to commit extortion were both federal crimes under federal law. The Assistant United States Attorney AUSA for the Eastern District of New York immediately took over the case. This sensitive and high-profile case was assigned to David Chen, a young prosecutor with a reputation for being sharp, decisive, and having a track record of handling cases involving corruption and abuse of public power. AUSA Chen recognized the importance of the case, not only for the victims, but also for strengthening public confidence in the integrity of the law enforcement system. He quickly worked closely with the FBI investigation team, led by SAC John Riley, to build an irrefutable case file. Meanwhile, the Port Authority Police Department launched its own internal investigation into Vance and Carter. However, under the immense pressure of the scandal and the overwhelming initial evidence provided by the FBI, the internal investigation was rushed. Both Ryan Vance and Ben Carter were immediately suspended. Their dismissals were made official just days later. The police badges they had worn were permanently stripped. In addition to losing their jobs, Vance and Carter faced a legal storm from the federal government. Based on preliminary evidence and testimony from Director Hayes, a formal arrest warrant was issued by a federal court. The two former police officers were arrested by FBI agents and taken to federal custody to await their first court date. The FBI investigation was thorough and professional. They left no stone unturned. Security camera analysis. Video footage from multiple angles at Terminal 4 clearly captured the entire incident, from the moment Vance and Carter approached Evelyn Hayes, the tense conversation, the illegal handcuffing, to the moment they attempted to extort money. Although the audio was not audible, the actions and gestures were clear. Checking personal devices. Fortunately, Carter had turned on his body cam as required but may have forgotten to turn it off or did not think it would record his misconduct. The audio and video recordings from the body cam became the most powerful evidence, recording all the racist and disparaging words and especially Vance's offer of $1,000. This was the smoking gun in the case. Witness testimony. The FBI took a formal statement from Director Evelyn Hayes. She presented the incident calmly, objectively, and accurately, without exaggeration or personal emotion, giving her testimony special weight. John Riley and other FBI agents who were on the scene also gave testimony about the director's condition when they arrived and the process of subduing and disarming the two suspects. Sergeant Al Miller, Vance and Carter's supervisor, was also called to provide information about the two former officers. Several passengers and airport employees who witnessed the incident were also located and interviewed, corroborating the victims' stories. Records. Check. The FBI conducted a disciplinary check on Vance and Carter's previous police department records. It found that Vance had several informal complaints about previous bullying and discrimination, but they were not serious enough to warrant serious disciplinary action. Carter had a cleaner record, but was noted to be easily influenced by his peers. Carter's testimony, faced with serious federal charges and incontrovertible body cam evidence, Ben Carter, with the advice of his attorney, decided to cooperate with the prosecution. He agreed to plead guilty to lesser charges and provide a full, detailed account of the entire conspiracy and Ryan Vance's actions, admitting his complicity. Carter's testimony further undermined Vance's position. After gathering sufficient evidence, AUSA David Chen formally presented the indictment to a federal grand jury. The grand jury, after reviewing the evidence, voted to indict Ryan Vance and Ben Carter on serious federal charges. 1. Violation of civil rights under color of law. This crime targets the abuse of power by a law enforcement official to intentionally deprive a citizen of his or her legal rights, in this case, liberty and equal treatment. 2. Hobbs Act extortion. Conspiracy. This offense criminalizes conspiring or committing an extortion act that interferes with interstate commerce, activities at international airports that are considered to affect interstate commerce. Vance's defense attorney, who now faced a much more difficult situation because Carter had cooperated, attempted to negotiate a plea deal to avoid trial. However, AUSA David Chen, with the support of the Department of Justice and aware of the serious symbolic nature of the case, rejected any disproportionate leniency. He was determined to bring both men to trial before a jury so that justice could be served openly and transparently, and to send a strong deterrent message to all who might consider abuse of power and corruption in law enforcement. The path to justice has been opened. Vance and Carter must now prepare to face a federal trial, where their fate will be decided. The trial of former police officers Ryan Vance and Ben Carter took place a few months later in the United States District Court for the Eastern District of New York, located in Brooklyn. The case attracted intense media and public attention, not only because the victim was the FBI director, but also because it touched on the thorny issues of racism, abuse of power, and corruption in law enforcement. The courtroom was packed with reporters, members of the public, and activists. The prosecution, led by Deputy U.S. Attorney David Chen, had prepared an extremely strong case. He presented the evidence systematically and logically to the jury of 12 people. The video from the airport security camera was shown, clearly showing the two defendants stopping, searching, and handcuffing Evelyn Hayes. Most important was the audio and video from Ben Carter's body cam. When the tape was played, the entire courtroom fell silent, listening to Ryan Vance's racial slurs and especially his blatant offer of $1,000. This was irrefutable evidence, directly attacking the defendant's defense. The star witness, FBI Director Evelyn Hayes, took the stand. She appeared in formal business attire with a calm, professional demeanor. She recounted the entire incident clearly, coherently, and accurately, down to every detail, without showing any agitation or personal emotion. She simply presented the facts as a citizen whose rights had been violated and a witness to the case. Her calmness, integrity, and authority made a strong impression and almost absolute persuasiveness on the jury. Her testimony could not be shaken by the defense attorney's questions. FBI agents who were on the scene that day also testified, confirming Director Hayes' condition when they arrived, Vance and Carter's panicked demeanor, and the process of collecting evidence. Ben Carter's testimony, as part of his plea agreement, was also presented in court, admitting to all of his and his team's wrongdoing, especially Vance's role in orchestrating the extortion scheme. The defense faced a nearly impossible task. Ryan Vance's attorney tried his best to minimize his client's culpability. He argued that Vance had acted out of a misunderstanding, under pressure, in a stressful environment like an airport, and that the offer of money was a moment of impulse, a foolish joke, rather than a deliberate extortion attempt. He also tried to question Carter's motives for cooperating with the prosecution, suggesting that Carter was trying to pin the blame on Vance to save himself. As for the civil rights charges, the defense denied any racial bias, arguing that they were just words uttered in the heat of the moment. However, all of these arguments fell flat in the face of overwhelming evidence, especially the body cam recording. Ben Carter's attorney focused on his client's inexperience and the fact that he acted under orders and pressure from his older teammates. He emphasized Carter's cooperation and remorse as factors in his request for a reduced sentence. After final arguments from both sides, the jury retired to deliberate. Their deliberations did not last long. After just a few hours, they returned to the courtroom with a unanimous verdict. The jury foreman rose and read the verdict aloud. We, the jury, find defendant Ryan Vance guilty of violating civil rights under color of law and guilty of conspiracy to extort money under the Hobbs Act. We also find defendant Ben Carter guilty of violating civil rights under color of law and guilty of conspiracy to extort money under the Hobbs Act. Ryan Vance paled and collapsed onto the table as he heard the verdict. Ben Carter closed his eyes, accepting his fate. Justice had been decided. The sentencing hearing took place a few weeks later. AUSA David Chen once again stressed the seriousness of the case, the betrayal of public trust by those who were supposed to protect them, the reprehensible racial discrimination, and especially the blatant extortion scheme. He requested a severe prison sentence for both defendants to ensure deterrence. Defense attorneys made final pleas for mercy, citing their client's remorse, burden to his family, and ability to reform. Superintendent Evelyn Hayes was also present at the sentencing hearing and gave a victim statement. She focused not on individual pain, but on the negative impact that actions like Vance's and Carter's have on the entire law enforcement system. "When those who wear the badge abuse their power out of prejudice or greed," she said, her voice calm but powerful, "they not only harm an individual, they erode the fragile and hard-won foundation of trust between police and the community. Today's sentence must send a clear message that integrity, fairness, and respect for the law are non-negotiable requirements for anyone serving in law enforcement." Finally, the federal judge presiding over the trial delivered her verdict. She looked directly at the two defendants standing before her. "Ryan Vance and Ben Carter," she began, her voice stern, "you were entrusted with a sacred duty to uphold justice and serve the people. Instead, you chose to abuse your power, act on racial prejudice, and attempt to enrich yourself by extorting money from a fellow citizen. Your actions are a disgrace to the badge you once bore and a stain on all honest law enforcement." She stressed the abhorrence of extortion, especially when it is racially motivated. "Your actions are not just a single crime, but an attack on the very foundations of the rule of law society in which we live. It demands a severe and appropriate punishment. Therefore," the judge stated, "the court sentences defendant Ryan Vance to 12 years in federal prison. The court sentences defendant Ben Carter, in consideration of his cooperation but not his active complicity, to 8 years in federal prison." A harsh sentence, reflecting the seriousness of the crimes they had committed. Vance and Carter were handcuffed and led out of the courtroom by federal marshals to begin their sentences, bringing a bitter end to their brief and scandalous law enforcement careers. The sentencing of Ryan Vance and Ben Carter sent shockwaves through the public and especially the law enforcement community nationwide. The case became a stark reminder of the dire consequences of abuse of power, racism, and corruption. It affirmed that no one, no matter what badge they wear, is above the law, especially when faced with the full force of the federal judiciary. The Port Authority Police Department has undergone extensive internal reviews. A series of reforms have been introduced, including increased oversight, changes to hiring procedures, and retraining of the entire force on ethics, anti-discrimination, identifying bias, and the appropriate use of force. The incident has also prompted the adoption and use of body cameras more seriously in other police departments. The reputation of the Federal Bureau of Investigation and Director Evelyn Hayes personally was further enhanced by the case. Her calm, professional handling of the situation in the face of abuse of power, along with the federal agency's swift, effective response and determination to pursue justice to the end, earned her strong public recognition. The case underscored the power and necessity of a federal law enforcement agency with the authority and resources to investigate and prosecute serious misconduct, even when it involves local law enforcement officials. Back to work at the FBI's J. Edgar Hoover headquarters in Washington, D.C., Director Evelyn Hayes sits in her large office, looking out the large windows at the Capitol and the Washington Monument. She has just finished a tense meeting about a new counterterrorism strategy. She felt no joy or glee at the downfall and sentencing of the two young former police officers. She felt only relief and satisfaction that justice had been served fairly and strictly. The JFK incident was a personal, painful, but necessary reminder of the persistent challenges facing America and law enforcement, the underlying racism, the potential for abuse of power, and the temptation to corruption. She knows that the fight to build a law enforcement agency that is truly honest, fair, respectful of human rights, and serves all people regardless of race or background is a long and arduous one. But she is undeterred. The incident has only strengthened her resolve to lead the FBI with integrity, fairness, and an unwavering commitment to the rule of law. She will continue to work to ensure that those in positions of power are always aware of the great responsibility that comes with it and are held fully accountable for their actions. Evelyn Hayes took a deep breath and returned to her desk, where piles of files and reports awaited her. She picked up the phone, made another call, and continued her mission of protecting national security and delivering justice to the country. The real satisfaction came not from punishing bad guys, but from believing that the system, however imperfect, was capable of self-correction and protecting its core values. Human dignity and legitimate power had finally prevailed in the unequal confrontation at the airport that day, and that was what mattered most. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. If you like this content, please click like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next meaningful stories, because tomorrow we will have another meaningful story for you.